What the most expensive medical team in history couldn't save a dying billionaire, but a hospital janitor could. Have you ever walked into a room full of experts and noticed something they completely missed? Something so obvious that it made you question how people with years of training could overlook it? Well, what happened at Presbyterian General Hospital will make you rethink everything you know about wisdom, observation, and where real intelligence comes from. This is the story of Elias Carter, a man worth $14 billion who controlled shipping empires across 3 continents. On the night of March 15th, he was mingling with society's elite at the annual Children's Cancer Foundation Gala, discussing his latest acquisition over champagne and caviar. The marble ballroom gleamed under crystal chandeliers as Manhattan's most powerful people celebrated their charitable donations. Then, without warning, Elias collapsed. Not a stumble, not a dizzy spell. He dropped like a stone, his 6-foot frame hitting the Italian marble with a sickening thud that silenced 300 guests instantly. His wife, Victoria, screamed as blood pooled beneath his head. Within minutes, paramedics were racing through Fifth Avenue traffic, sirens wailing, fighting to keep a global economic powerhouse alive. At Presbyterian General, the call went out immediately. Assembled the dream team: Dr. Harrison Wells, the cardiovascular surgeon who'd operated on presidents; Dr. Angela Martinez, the neurological specialist flown in from Johns Hopkins; Dr. Richard Kim, the trauma expert who'd saved lives in war zones. 10 of the country's most brilliant medical minds converged on one patient, determined to save the man whose heartbeat affected stock markets worldwide. The media gathered like vultures. Bloomberg terminals flashed updates. Trading floors held their breath. This wasn't just about one life. Elias Carter employed 40,000 people across the globe. His death would trigger economic chaos from New York to Singapore. Hour after hour, the medical team worked. Advanced imaging revealed nothing conclusive. Blood tests came back normal. Every procedure they attempted seemed to push Elias closer to the edge. His vitals fluctuated wildly, defying every protocol they'd ever learned. The finest medical equipment money could buy hummed and beeped around his bed, but nothing was working. By midnight, whispers filled the hallways. Could the impossible be happening? Were they about to lose a patient that should have been savable? But here's what none of those brilliant doctors knew. Someone else was watching. Someone whose paycheck was barely $400 a week, whose medical degree came from the school of life, and whose observation skills have been sharpened by growing up where missing details could get you killed. If you've ever felt invisible while having something important to say, you need to stick around for this story. Hit that like button right now, because what this janitor noticed will completely change how you see intelligence, expertise, and the power of paying attention. What did Malik Turner see that 10 medical degrees missed? Let me show you. Within 20 minutes of Elias hitting that marble floor, Presbyterian General Hospital transformed into a war zone of medical expertise. The helicopter carrying Dr. Martinez from Johns Hopkins was still circling Manhattan when Dr. Wells was already scrubbing in, his hands moving with the precision of someone who performed over 3,000 cardiac procedures. The team that assembled that night read like a medical hall of fame. Dr. Patricia Reeves, the pulmonary specialist who'd revolutionized lung transplant procedures; Dr. Michael Torres, the infectious disease expert who contained outbreaks across 4 countries; Dr. Rachel Foster, the toxicology genius who could identify poisons that stumped entire forensic teams. Each specialist represented decades of training, millions of dollars in education, and reputations built on saving lives that others had given up on. But Elias Carter wasn't responding like their textbooks said he should. The initial CT scans showed brain activity within normal parameters. No signs of stroke, no evidence of trauma beyond the head injury from his fall. His heart rhythm appeared stable, blood pressure manageable. Every indicator suggested this should be a straightforward case of concussion management and observation. Yet something was fundamentally wrong. By 2 a.m., Elias's condition had deteriorated in ways that defied medical logic. His respiratory system would stabilize for 30 minutes, then suddenly struggle as if fighting an invisible enemy. His neurological responses became increasingly erratic, responding to commands one moment, completely unresponsive the next. The monitor surrounding his bed painted a picture of a body at war with itself. Dr. Wells consulted with his colleagues in hushed, urgent conferences outside the ICU. They ran every test in their arsenal: complete metabolic panels, comprehensive toxicology screens, advanced neurological assessments. The results came back clean, normal, unremarkable. According to every piece of data they possessed, Elias Carter should have been sitting up asking for his morning coffee. Instead, he was dying. The media circus outside intensified with each passing hour. CNN had established a permanent broadcast position across the street. Financial networks provided continuous coverage as Carter Industries' stock price fluctuated with every medical update. The company's board of directors had gathered in an emergency session, trying to maintain stability while their leader fought for his life. Victoria Carter hadn't left her husband's bedside since arriving at the hospital. Her designer gown from the gala had been replaced with hospital scrubs, her perfectly styled hair now pulled back in a desperate ponytail. She watched the monitors obsessively, memorizing the rhythm of beeps and alarms that had become the soundtrack of her worst nightmare. "Talk to me, doctors," she pleaded during one of their bedside consultations. "You're supposed to be the best in the world. What aren't you seeing?" Dr. Martinez, exhausted after 18 straight hours of analysis, could only offer the truth that terrified them all. "Mrs. Carter, we're dealing with something we've never encountered before. Every protocol we follow seems to make him worse." The medical team had tried everything. They'd adjusted medications, modified ventilation settings, consulted specialists via video conference from London and Tokyo. Dr. Kim suggested exploratory surgery to search for internal injuries their imaging might have missed. Dr. Foster recommended aggressive detoxification procedures in case an unknown substance was causing the symptoms. Nothing worked. By dawn on March 16th, whispers of the impossible had begun circulating through the hospital corridors. Could 10 of the country's most accomplished physicians actually lose a patient whose condition should have been manageable? The thought was unthinkable, yet the evidence mounted with each passing hour. Elias's vitals continued their terrifying dance between stability and crisis. His body temperature fluctuated wildly despite every intervention. Most disturbing of all, his cellular oxygen levels remained dangerously low despite perfect ventilation and clear airways. Something was preventing his body from utilizing the oxygen it was receiving, but every test they ran indicated normal function. The team was approaching 48 hours without sleep. Coffee had stopped working hours ago, replaced by pure adrenaline and professional pride. They'd staked their reputations on cases far less significant than this one. Losing Elias Carter wouldn't just be a medical failure. It would be a public catastrophe that would haunt their careers forever. Dr. Wells stood in the hallway at 6 a.m., staring through the glass at his patient. His surgical hands, steady enough to operate on beating hearts, trembled slightly as he held his 6th cup of coffee. Behind him, the morning shift was arriving. Fresh faces who would look at this case with new eyes, hoping to see what the night team had missed. "We're missing something fundamental," he muttered to Dr. Martinez, who had joined him at the observation window. "Something so basic that we're looking right past it. Before I tell you who finally saw what these brilliant minds couldn't, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about expertise, observation, and where life-saving insights really come from." The answer was walking the halls right alongside them, emptying trash cans and mopping floors, watching everything with eyes that had been trained by a very different kind of education. While 10 of the nation's most distinguished physicians battled to save Elias Carter, another man moved quietly through the same corridors, his presence so routine that most people looked right through him. Malik Turner pushed his cleaning cart past the ICU for the 3rd time that morning, his movements deliberate and unhurried, his dark eyes taking in details that others had stopped noticing hours ago. At 42 years old, Malik had worked the night shift at Presbyterian General for 7 years. His official title was Environmental Services Technician, but everyone just called him the Janitor. His uniform was simple navy blue, his name tag often overlooked, his paycheck a fraction of what the doctors earned in a single day. But Malik possessed something that couldn't be taught in medical school, the ability to see patterns where others saw chaos. Growing up in East Baltimore, Malik had learned early that observation meant survival. In neighborhoods where danger could appear without warning, you watched everything. The way someone walked down the street, the subtle changes in familiar voices, the rhythm of normal life, and more importantly, when that rhythm shifted. These skills had kept him alive through his teenage years, helped him navigate military service in Afghanistan, and now serve him well in the controlled chaos of a major hospital. Malik wasn't just emptying waste baskets and mopping floors. Over 7 years of night shifts, he'd absorbed an education that no university could provide. He'd listened to thousands of medical conversations, watched countless procedures, observed how different machines behaved under various conditions. While doctors learned from textbooks and lectures, Malik learned from direct observation of life and death playing out in real time. The nurses respected him. He knew which ones were having rough nights before they did, often appearing with fresh coffee or a quiet word of encouragement exactly when they needed it most. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a resident who'd started the same year as Malik, often joked that he knew the hospital's rhythms better than computers that monitored them. Malik sees everything, she'd tell new staff members. If something's off on this floor, he'll know before the machines do. But Malik also understood his place in the hospital's hierarchy. He was a help, the support staff, the invisible infrastructure that kept the medical miracles running smoothly. His opinions weren't solicited in medical meetings. His observations weren't documented in patient charts. He existed in the background, essential but unacknowledged, like the electrical systems humming behind the walls. This positioning, however, gave Malik a unique vantage point. While doctors focused intensely on specific patients and procedures, Malik saw the entire ecosystem. He noticed when equipment behaved differently. He recognized subtle changes in the sounds machines made. He observed patterns in patient responses that medical staff, consumed with immediate crises, might miss. On the night Elias Carter arrived, Malik had been finishing his rounds on the 3rd floor when the helicopter landed on the roof. He'd watched the medical team assemble with professional interest, recognizing the tension that accompanied high-profile cases. He'd seen similar situations before: wealthy patients, media attention, enormous pressure on the medical staff to perform miracles. But as the hours passed, Malik noticed something that troubled him. This wasn't the usual controlled urgency of emergency medicine. This was confusion, frustration, and growing desperation. The doctor's body language had changed. Their confident strides became hesitant walks. Their animated discussions became hushed, worried conferences. More concerning to Malik were the sounds coming from the ICU. After 7 years of listening to medical equipment, he developed an almost musical understanding of how machines should sound. The ventilators had their rhythm, the heart monitors their steady beat, the 4 pumps their consistent timing. When everything worked in harmony, it created a subtle symphony of life support. But Elias Carter's room sounded wrong. It wasn't anything dramatic enough to trigger alarms or alert the medical staff. The irregularities were subtle, almost imperceptible unless you'd spent thousands of hours listening to these exact sounds. The timing was slightly off, the rhythm inconsistent in ways that suggested something fundamental was being overlooked. Malik had first noticed it around 3 a.m. when he paused outside the ICU to replace the batteries in an emergency light. The pattern had caught his attention. Not alarming enough to cause immediate concern, but persistent enough to indicate an underlying problem that wasn't being addressed. By 6 a.m., as the exhausted medical team prepared for another day of trying procedures that hadn't worked the night before, Malik had reached a conclusion that both excited and terrified him. He believed he knew what was wrong with Elias Carter. The question was whether anyone would listen to a janitor who'd learned medicine by watching and listening rather than studying and testing. The answer would determine whether a billionaire lived or died. At 7:15 a.m. on March 16th, while Dr. Wells was explaining to Victoria Carter that they were running out of conventional options, Malik Turner was studying the pattern that had been haunting him for 4 hours. He'd positioned himself strategically in the supply closet adjacent to the ICU, where he could hear the medical equipment clearly without drawing attention. His cleaning supplies provided perfect cover. No one questioned a janitor restocking medical supplies during shift change. But Malik wasn't focused on inventory. He was listening to a rhythm that told a story the doctors weren't hearing. The The ventilator supporting Elias's breathing cycled every 4 seconds, delivering precisely measured oxygen. The heart monitor beeped steadily, showing a cardiac rhythm that appeared stable. The 4-pump delivered medications with mechanical precision. To the trained medical ear, everything sounded normal. But Malik heard the disconnect. Every 12 minutes, exactly 12 minutes, there was a subtle shift in the ventilator's rhythm. Not a malfunction, not an alarm-worthy deviation, just a barely perceptible change in timing that lasted for roughly 30 seconds before returning to normal. During these periods, the heart monitor would show slight irregularities, nothing dramatic enough to trigger alerts, but consistent enough to create a pattern. Most importantly, Malik had noticed that Elias's visible distress correlated precisely with these 12-minute cycles. The patient would become restless. His breathing would appear more labored despite the ventilator's assistance, and his skin would take on a slightly grayish tint before returning to normal. Malik had spent the last 2 hours timing these episodes with his watch, documenting what he observed. The pattern was absolutely consistent. Something was interfering with Elias's oxygen absorption every 12 minutes, but only for 30 seconds at a time. The medical team was focused on major systemic failures, heart problems, brain injuries, toxic exposures, organ dysfunction. They were looking for dramatic causes that would explain dramatic symptoms. But what if the problem wasn't dramatic? What if it was subtle, repetitive, and easy to miss unless you were listening for it? Malik's military experience had taught him that sometimes the most dangerous threats weren't the obvious ones. In Afghanistan, the IEDs that killed soldiers weren't always the massive explosions that destroyed entire vehicles. Sometimes it was the small, perfectly timed devices that caused just enough damage to disable critical systems while appearing manageable on the surface. What if something similar was happening to Elias Carter? The breakthrough came when Malik connected 2 observations that had been bothering him since the early morning hours. First, the 12-minute cycle coincided exactly with the rotation schedule of the automated medication delivery system. Second, he'd noticed that one of the 4 lines had a slightly different color than the others. Not dramatically different, but enough to catch the eye of someone who'd seen thousands of 4 setups. Malik had watched Dr. Foster personally oversee the medication protocols, ensuring that every drug was precisely calibrated for Elias's weight, condition, and specific needs. The toxicology expert had been meticulous, double-checking every calculation, every mixture, every delivery rate. But what if the problem wasn't with the medications themselves? What if something was wrong with how they were being delivered? Malik's heart rate increased as the possibility took shape in his mind. He'd observed enough medical procedures to understand that for drug delivery depended on precise timing and mixture ratios. If there was a problem with one of the delivery lines, a blockage, a leak, or a cross-contamination, it could cause exactly the kind of subtle, cyclical symptoms he'd been observing. The medical team was analyzing what was going into Elias's body, but were they considering whether it was actually getting where it needed to go? Standing in that supply closet, holding his clipboard of cleaning duties, Malik faced the most important decision of his life. He could continue his shift, complete his rounds, and hope that the brilliant doctors would eventually figure out what he suspected. Or he could risk his job, his reputation, and his dignity by approaching medical professionals with theory based on nothing more than careful observation and intuitive pattern recognition. Have you ever had information that could save someone's life, but felt like no one would listen because of who you are? Drop a comment and let me know, because what happens next will shock you. Time was running out. Every 12-minute cycle was taking Elias closer to the point of no return. Malik had to choose silence or courage. At 7:43 a.m., Dr. Olivia Steele emerged from the ICU looking like she'd been through a medical battlefield. As the lead surgeon coordinating the team's efforts, she carried the weight of 10 professional reputations on her shoulders, not to mention the life of one of the world's most powerful men. Her usually pristine surgical scrubs were wrinkled, her hair escaping from its surgical cap, her eyes rimmed with the exhaustion that comes from 36 hours of fighting an impossible case. She leaned against the nurse's station, reviewing the latest test results that revealed absolutely nothing new. Normal kidney function, normal liver enzymes, normal neurological responses. Every indicator suggested Elias Carter should be recovering, yet he was clearly dying by degrees. Malik watched her from 30 feet away, his cleaning cart positioned near the elevator bank. He'd been building courage for the past 20 minutes, rehearsing how to approach someone whose medical degree had cost more than Malik would earn in 5 years. The weight of what he needed to say pressed against his chest like a physical force. 3 times, he'd started walking toward her. 3 times, he'd turned back. Who was he to question doctors who'd trained at Harvard and Johns Hopkins? Who was he to suggest that 10 medical experts had missed something that a janitor had noticed? The rational part of his mind whispered all the reasons to stay quiet. He could be wrong. He could embarrass himself. He could lose his job for overstepping boundaries that had been clearly established over 7 years of employment. But every 12 minutes, those machines told the same story of a man slowly suffocating despite perfect ventilation. Malik's breaking point came when he saw Victoria Carter through the ICU window. She was holding her husband's hand, her lips moving in what appeared to be prayer, her shoulders shaking with exhaustion and grief. This wasn't about medical hierarchies or professional boundaries. This was about a woman watching the love of her life slip away while everyone who was supposed to help him stood by. Helpless. Decision made, Malik pushed his car aside and walked directly toward Dr. Steele. Dr. Steele? His voice was quiet but steady, refined by years of military discipline. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I need to tell you something about Mr. Carter. Dr. Steele looked up from her charts, her expression shifting from exhaustion to mild irritation. Her eyes took in Malik's uniform, his name tag, his cleaning cart parked nearby. In the medical world's rigid hierarchy, janitors didn't interrupt surgeons with medical observations. I'm sorry, but I don't have time right now, she said, her tone professional but dismissive. If there's a housekeeping issue, please speak with your supervisor. Ma'am, this isn't about housekeeping, Malik replied, his voice remaining calm despite the rejection. I've been observing Mr. Carter's condition for the past 6 hours, and I believe there's a pattern you might want to consider. The word observing caught Dr. Steele's attention. She looked at Malik more carefully, noting the intelligence in his eyes, the confident way he held himself despite the obvious disparity in their positions. Go ahead, she said, setting down her charts. But make it quick. Malik pulled out a small notebook where he'd been documenting his observations. Every 12 minutes, Mr. Carter experiences respiratory distress that lasts approximately 30 seconds. During these episodes, his heart rate increases slightly, and his skin develops a grayish tint. The episodes coincide exactly with the medication delivery cycles. Dr. Steele's eyebrows raised. The specificity of his observations, the medical terminology he used, the fact that he'd been timing and documenting. This wasn't what she'd expected from a janitor. I've noticed that floor line number 3 has a slightly different appearance than the others, Malik continued, pointing toward the ICU room. The color is just slightly off, and I believe there might be an issue with drug delivery or mixing that's causing periodic oxygen blockage at the cellular level. The corridor fell silent, except for the distant hum of medical equipment. Dr. Steele stared at Malik, processing what he'd just told her. His theory was medically sound. His observations were detailed and specific, and most importantly, it explained symptoms that had been baffling her team for over 30 hours. You think there's a delivery problem with the 4 system? She asked, her tone shifting from skeptical to genuinely interested. Yes, ma'am. Something that's not dramatic enough to trigger alarms, but consistent enough to prevent proper medication absorption. It would explain why all your tests come back normal, while Mr. Carter continues to deteriorate. Dr. Steele was already moving toward the ICU, her mind racing through the implications. If Malik was right, they'd been treating the symptoms while missing the cause entirely. If he was wrong, they'd waste precious time chasing a janitor's theory while a patient died. But as she looked through the ICU window at Elias Carter's gray pallor, she realized they were already out of conventional options. Sometimes the most unlikely solutions came from the most unexpected sources. Show me exactly what you're seeing, she said, motioning for Malik to follow her into the room. For the first time in 7 years, Malik Turner was about to practice medicine. Inside the ICU, surrounded by millions of dollars worth of medical equipment, Dr. Steele followed Malik's gaze to the 4 line he'd identified. At first glance, it appeared identical to the others. Clear tubing, proper connections, steady drip rate. But as Malik pointed out the subtle color difference he'd noticed, she began to see what he meant. "There," Malik said quietly, indicating a section of tubing near the mixing chamber. "The fluid has a slightly cloudy appearance compared to the others. It's not dramatic, but it's consistent." Dr. Steele examined the line more closely, her trained eyes now searching for what Malik had observed from across the room. The cloudiness was barely perceptible, the kind of detail that could easily be missed during the chaos of emergency treatment. But it was there. "When does the next cycle begin?" she asked, checking her watch. "In about 3 minutes," Malik replied, consulting his notebook. "Watch his respiratory pattern and skin tone during the 30-second window." Dr. Steele positioned herself where she could observe both Elias and the monitors. Around them, the morning medical team continued their rounds, unaware that a potential breakthrough was developing in their most challenging case. At exactly the 12-minute mark, the subtle changes Malik had described began. Elias's breathing, though mechanically assisted, showed signs of increased effort. His skin tone shifted almost imperceptibly toward gray. The heart monitor registered a slight increase in rate. Nothing alarming enough to trigger alerts, but consistent with decreased oxygen efficiency. Dr. Steele watched the 4 line during this episode and noticed something she'd never seen before. A brief interruption in the flow rate, so subtle that only someone looking specifically for it would catch it. The medication delivery system was experiencing micro-blockages that were preventing proper drug distribution. "You're right," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of amazement and relief. "There's definitely an obstruction in the delivery system." Moving quickly, Dr. Steele called for her team to gather in the ICU. Dr. Wells, Dr. Martinez, and the other specialists assembled around Elias's bed, their faces showing the skepticism that comes with 36 hours of failed attempts. "We're changing our approach," Dr. Steele announced. "We have reason to believe there's a mechanical problem with medication delivery rather than a systemic patient issue." Dr. Wells frowned. "Olivia, we've checked all the equipment multiple times. Everything is functioning normally. The blockage is intermittent and subtle," she explained, gesturing toward the 4 line Malik had identified. "It's causing periodic interruptions in drug absorption that are preventing treatment effectiveness." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. If Dr. Steele was correct, they'd been fighting the wrong battle for over a day. Instead of treating complex medical conditions, they needed to solve a mechanical delivery problem. Dr. Martinez stepped forward to examine the 4 system more closely. Within minutes, she'd identified the source of the issue. Microscopic particulate matter in one of the medication solutions was creating intermittent blockages in the delivery tube. The particles weren't large enough to stop flow completely, but they were sufficient to disrupt the precise timing and mixture ratios that Elias's treatment required. "How do we miss this?" Dr. Wells asked, his voice heavy with exhaustion and frustration. "Because we were looking for medical causes, not mechanical ones," Dr. Steele replied. "Sometimes a solution is simpler than we expect." The team moved with renewed energy, replacing the compromised 4 line and ensuring that all medication solutions were properly filtered. They adjusted the delivery protocols to account for the time lost due to ineffective treatment, recalibrating dosages, and timing to compensate for the previous 36 hours of interrupted therapy. Within 20 minutes of implementing the new approach, Elias's vital signs began showing improvement. His oxygen saturation levels, which had been fluctuating mysteriously for over a day, stabilized at healthy ranges. His respiratory distress decreased noticeably, and the grayish tint to his skin began to fade. The 12-minute cycles of distress stopped entirely. By 9 a.m., less than 2 hours after Malik had approached Dr. Steele, Elias Carter was showing signs of genuine recovery. His neurological responses improved dramatically, his heart rhythm normalized, and for the first time since his collapse, his body appeared to be properly utilizing the medications that were keeping him alive. Victoria Carter, who had maintained her bedside vigil through the darkest hours, broke down in tears of relief as she watched her husband's color return to normal. The monitors that had been broadcasting impending doom for over 30 hours now sang a steady song of recovery. If this story is touching your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it, because the ending will restore your faith in humanity. The medical miracle wasn't the result of advanced technology or years of specialized training. It was a product of careful observation, humble courage, and the willingness of one professional to listen to another, regardless of their position on the hospital's organizational chart. But this was just the beginning of a transformation that would change lives far beyond one ICU room. By noon on March 16th, word of the miraculous recovery had spread through Presbyterian General Hospital like wildfire. Nurses whispered in break rooms about the janitor who'd solved the case that stumped 10 specialists. Residents gathered around coffee machines, discussing how someone without medical training had identified what they'd all missed. The story took on a life of its own as it traveled from floor to floor. Dr. Steele didn't try to hide what had happened. During the afternoon medical briefing, she stood before her colleagues and delivered the truth with the same precision she brought to surgery. The breakthrough in the Carter case came from Malik Turner, a member of our environmental services team. She announced the assembled medical staff. His careful observation and pattern recognition identified a mechanical delivery problem that our diagnostic protocols had overlooked. The room buzzed with surprised murmurs. Some physicians looked skeptical. How could a janitor succeed where they had failed? Others leaned forward with genuine interest, eager to understand how they'd missed something so crucial. This case reminds us that healing isn't the exclusive domain of medical degrees. Dr. Steele continued. Sometimes the most valuable insights come from those who watch carefully and listen closely, regardless of their formal training. Dr. Wells, initially resistant to crediting a janitor with saving their patient, had spent the morning reviewing the case timeline. The evidence was undeniable. Malik's observations had been systematic, accurate, and ultimately life-saving. During his own address to the surgical team, he made a statement that would be repeated throughout the hospital for years to come. We were so focused on complex solutions that we missed a simple problem, he admitted. It took someone with fresh eyes and no preconceived notions to see what we couldn't. The hospital's administration took notice immediately. Dr. Margaret Thompson, the chief medical officer, requested a meeting with Malik that same afternoon. She found him in the supply room, quietly restocking medical equipment, as if he hadn't just saved one of the most important patients in the hospital's history. "Mr. Turner," she began, "I understand you've had quite a day." Malik looked up from his inventory checklist, his expression humble but alert. "Just doing my job, Dr. Thompson." "Actually, you did much more than your job," she replied. "You demonstrated observational skills and medical intuition that impressed our entire staff. I'd like to discuss ways the hospital can better utilize your talents." Within a week, Presbyterian General had implemented new protocols encouraging input from all staff members, regardless of department or title. Malik was invited to participate in patient observation rounds, his unique perspective now valued as part of the hospital's diagnostic process. He remained in environmental services by choice, but his role expanded to include what administrators termed environmental pattern assessment. The media attention was inevitable. When reporters learned that a janitor had saved a billionaire CEO, the story exploded across news networks nationwide. But the coverage that mattered most came from Medical Journal Weekly, which published a detailed analysis of the Carter case titled Beyond Hierarchy: Lessons in Collaborative Patient Care. Dr. Martinez, who had become fascinated by the diagnostic implications of the case, co-authored the article with Dr. Steele. Their conclusion challenged traditional medical thinking. Effective patient care requires input from all members of the healthcare team. Observation skills aren't limited by educational credentials, and healing insights can emerge from unexpected sources. The article sparked discussions at medical conferences across the country. Teaching hospitals began incorporating comprehensive observation training into their curricula, emphasizing the importance of listening to all healthcare workers, not just physicians and nurses. But the most significant transformation occurred in the relationship between two men who had never spoken before that March morning. A billionaire CEO recovering from near death, and a janitor whose quiet courage had saved his life. Elias Carter had awakened to learn that his recovery was due not to the expensive specialists his insurance had funded, but to a hospital employee whose annual salary was less than what Elias spent on wine each month. The irony wasn't lost on him, but neither was a profound lesson about where wisdom truly resides. Their first conversation would begin a friendship that neither man could have expected, built on mutual respect and a shared understanding that value isn't determined by wealth or position, but by character and courage. 3 days after regaining consciousness, Elias Carter requested to meet the man who had saved his life. Victoria had told him the basic story. A hospital janitor had noticed what 10 specialists had missed, but Elias needed to understand for himself how someone earning minimum wage had accomplished what his expensive medical team could not. Malik entered the private recovery room with the same quiet confidence he brought to everything else. He wore his standard Navy uniform, his name tag properly positioned, his posture reflecting both respect and self-assurance. Despite the media attention and hospital recognition, he remained fundamentally unchanged. "Mr. Carter," Malik said simply, extending his hand. "I'm glad to see you're recovering well." Elias studied the man before him, mid-40s, intelligent eyes, callous hands that spoke of honest work. This was a person whose observation skills had literally saved his life, yet he carried himself without arrogance or expectation. "Please, call me Elias," the billionaire replied, grasping Malik's hand firmly. "I understand I owe you my life." "You don't owe me anything," Malik responded. "I saw something that needed attention, and I spoke up. Any decent person would have done the same." The humility in that statement struck Elias profoundly. In his business world, taking credit was essential for advancement. People fought over recognition, claimed victories they hadn't earned, and positioned themselves for maximum personal gain. Yet here was a man who had performed a genuine miracle and refused to treat it as anything more than basic human decency. "Tell me about yourself, Malik," Elias said, settling back against his pillows. "How did you develop such sharp observation skills?" Over the next hour, Malik shared pieces of his story. Growing up in neighborhoods where paying attention kept you safe. Military service in Afghanistan, where noticing details meant the difference between coming home and coming home in a box. 7 years at Presbyterian General, watching and learning from thousands of medical situations. "You've had an extraordinary life," Elias observed, "yet you work as a janitor. Have you ever considered other career paths?" Malik smiled quietly. "Mr. Carter, Elias, I've learned that meaningful work isn't about titles or paychecks. It's about contributing something valuable to the world around you. I help keep this hospital running smoothly. I pay attention to things others might miss. I make a difference in small ways every day. That feels pretty significant to me." The perspective challenged everything Elias had believed about success and satisfaction. He'd spent decades accumulating wealth, building empires, and measuring his worth through financial statements and market valuations. Yet this man, earning a fraction of what Elias spent on lunch, demonstrated contentment and purpose that felt genuinely enviable. "What would you do," Elias asked carefully, "if money weren't a consideration? If you could pursue any path without worrying about supporting yourself?" Malik was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. "I've always been curious about medical technology," he finally admitted. "How machines work, how they could work better, how to bridge the gap between equipment and the people who operate it. But that's not practical for someone in my position. What if it could be practical?" Elias asked quietly. Their conversation continued for another hour, covering topics from family backgrounds to life philosophies. Despite their vastly different circumstances, they discovered shared values: the importance of hard work, the satisfaction of helping others, and the belief that everyone deserves respect regardless of their position in life. When Malik finally left the room, both men felt they'd begun something unexpected, a friendship based not on mutual advantage, but on genuine respect and shared humanity. 6 weeks after leaving Presbyterian General Hospital, Elias Carter made an announcement that surprised the business world and delighted the medical community. Carter Industries would establish the Turner Medical Technology Scholarship Program, providing full educational funding for healthcare workers seeking to advance their knowledge and skills. The program's first recipient was Malik Turner himself. Elias had spent those 6 weeks researching medical technology programs, consulting with university administrators, and designing a scholarship structure that would remove financial barriers for deserving candidates. The program targeted current healthcare employees, Janitors, technicians, orderlies, nurses, aides, whose daily observations and practical experience gave them unique perspectives on medical challenges. Intelligence and wisdom aren't distributed according to job titles, Elias explained during the scholarship announcement. This program recognizes that breakthrough insights can come from anyone who pays attention and cares deeply about patient outcomes. Malik accepted the scholarship with the same quiet dignity he'd shown throughout the entire experience. He would continue working part-time at Presbyterian General while pursuing a degree in biomedical engineering, focusing on the intersection between medical equipment design and patient care optimization. This opportunity allows me to contribute more effectively to the field I've been learning about for 7 years, Malik told reporters. I want to help create better systems that serve both patients and the healthcare workers who care for them. The scholarship program grew rapidly. Within a year, 12 healthcare workers across the country were pursuing advanced degrees in medical technology, nursing administration, and healthcare innovation. Each recipient brought practical experience and fresh perspectives to their academic studies, creating a new generation of healthcare professionals who understood both the theoretical and operational aspects of patient care. Dr. Steele became the program's medical advisor, helping select candidates and mentor scholarship recipients. The partnership between Presbyterian General and Carter Industries transformed how both organizations approached innovation and problem solving. More importantly, the program created a culture shift within the healthcare industry. Hospitals began actively seeking input from all staff members during patient care planning. Medical equipment manufacturers consulted with frontline workers during product development. The artificial barriers between medical professionals and support staff began dissolving as institutions recognized the value of comprehensive perspectives. Malik's story inspired similar programs at other hospitals and medical centers. The Turner Protocol, systematic observation, and reporting by all healthcare team members became standard practice at progressive medical facilities nationwide. The impact extended beyond individual careers and institutional changes. The scholarship program became a model for corporate social responsibility that focused on empowering existing workers rather than simply donating money to causes. Other business leaders took notice, creating similar opportunities in their own industries. What started as one man's careful observation in a hospital hallway had become a movement that challenged traditional hierarchies and recognized talent wherever it existed. But for Malik and Elias, the greatest reward wasn't the public recognition or industry transformation. It was the knowledge that their unlikely partnership had created opportunities for others who might otherwise remain invisible, ensuring that future life-saving insights wouldn't be overlooked simply because they came from unexpected sources. Today, 5 years after that March night, when a billionaire's life hung in the balance, Malik Turner works as a biomedical systems analyst at Presbyterian General Hospital. His office is just 2 floors above the ICU where he once emptied trash cans and noticed patterns that saved a life. Elias Carter recovered completely and continues to run his global empire, but his approach to leadership has fundamentally changed. He regularly visits hospitals, not as a donor seeking recognition, but as someone who understands that the most valuable insights often come from the people others overlook. Their friendship endures, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to recognizing talent wherever it exists. They meet monthly, sometimes discussing medical innovations, sometimes just talking about life. Malik still calls him Mr. Carter occasionally, and Elias still marvels at the quiet wisdom of the man who saved his life. The Turner Medical Technology Scholarship has now funded over 200 healthcare workers in pursuing advanced degrees. 3 scholarship recipients have developed medical devices currently saving lives in hospitals worldwide. 12 have become department heads or administrators, bringing their unique perspectives to healthcare leadership. Dr. Steele often tells a story to new medical residents, reminding them that healing is a collaborative effort that extends far beyond physicians and nurses. The person mopping your floor might be the one who saved your patient, she tells them. Listen to everyone, because wisdom doesn't require a medical degree. But perhaps the most important legacy of that March night isn't found in scholarship programs or hospital protocols. It's in the countless moments when healthcare workers now speak up instead of staying silent, when administrators listen to janitors and orderlies, when doctors ask maintenance staff what they've observed. It's in the understanding that every person in a healthcare facility is part of the healing process, and that sometimes the most critical insights come from those who simply watch carefully and care deeply. What's one time you learned something valuable from someone others overlooked? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible true stories that will change how you see the world. Because heroes don't always wear scrubs or suits. Sometimes they wear uniforms with their names on simple tags, carrying mops instead of stethoscopes, saving lives through quiet observation and the courage to speak truth to power. Sometimes the most important person in the room is the one everyone else assumes doesn't matter.